Hello everybody, my name is Hammock. Today I'd like to talk about some very core philosophy behind the engineers' buildings in Team Fortress 2, since they have a very powerful impact on the game, and oftentimes they're just either placed down in a very random spot, maybe they're placed down in a very particular spot for a situation that never actually happens, or maybe they're just copying what other people do and assume that it works in all cases. In competitive, like in Highlander, the engineer has very specific places where he can be optimal, because that's the thing about competitive. You want to be your most optimal self. You want to improve and develop and figure out the best ways to do things. And with buildings, that often ends up being there's a very defined place for a sentry. Like my previous videos about sentry spots. They're very useful guides for people who don't know anything about engineer and just need like a quick handy refresher for where to build sentries on a map. That way if they're going into their first Team Fortress 2 lobby or pug, or maybe even playing a team in like a open division, they can just have a quick and handy reference guide to just put down their gun. Now what I really want to encourage in people is understanding what each building provides to the game, what it provides to the class, and how it affects the flow of the game. That way you can use them like a paintbrush on a canvas. The map is your canvas, and where you put your sentry, your dispenser, and your telly can paint a completely different picture from game to game, and that's why I think it has a lot of replayability. Engineer can very easily be a boring class. I mean, a lot of people who don't play engineer seriously will just look at it from the people who play in pubs, who are probably just playing on barn blitz stack and stacking like 6 sentries on the roof and just holding down wrench. Yeah, of course, that looks boring. Anything looks boring if you just play it in its most minimal state. You have people complaining about pyros who just run in holding W. To be fair, if you die to that, that's your fault. Or the spies who just run around just stabbing Razorback snipers. Like, there is an optimal way of playing every class, and there is a unoptimal, really bad way of playing a class that is often seen in the variety of general pub play. Now, to stop myself from tangenting too much, because I tend to do that, I want to just talk about each building, what I think it provides. You may have a different idea on it. If you do, please, comment about what you think the building does and how you would change the game. I'm mainly speaking from a pragmatic view of I've played a lot of Highlander, a little bit of 6s, I've played maybe a few 7s pugs. I haven't played too much of that, so maybe engineer has a completely different role in 7s that I am unaware of, but here it is. So the sentry gun is area denial. That is engineer's core role. He puts down a gun, and that is like a flag. Anyone who is within the borders of that gun is safe. So you want to put that in a place where you want your team to be safe and feel safe. The problem is a lot of people play their sentry gun like a shield, like a Reinhardt. Like, if the sentry is the first thing to be shot, it dies. It's got 216 HP, that is not enough. It is going to get destroyed. Even if you Wrangler tank it, when you Wrangler tank it, you're dealing less heals to the sentry, so it's just going to go down. It's tankier, but it has less sustain when it's in the Wrangler state. So you can't tank with the gun. You should be having your heavy, you should have your soldiers and demos with overheals at the front line. So if you're playing in an optimal Highlander game, you have the sentry at the back to stop people from just walking in onto your medic, to stop the anti-airs, stop the bombers with anti-air, and you just have it as a flag. People stand within that. It's its own capture point. Once you take down the sentry, you have lost the capture point. So you don't want to have it like too close where it's just going to get destroyed immediately. You want it in a nice safe position where it can do its job, but it is not the primary focus of fire. That's why I like being creative with mini sentries, for example, where if you're playing on a control point, you want to have your mini sentry in a point where as soon as they're on the control point, the mini can shoot them. They can't shoot the mini until they're on the control point, where they already have their attention distracted by your team. So you want it in a position where it's contesting space, but it's not going to be aggravated outside of that space. So if it gets taken out by the enemy who is on the control point, then it just means that your team hasn't aggravated them enough that they're more of a threat than the mini sentry. So that's how I like to use mini sentries. There are lots of other ways to do it. You can like wrangle a mini sentry and you can play from really far away. Feel free to get sniped doing that, but I like to play with that kind of mentality with mini sentries. Now the dispenser is also a flag in itself. The sentry defines the space in which you don't want the enemy to be, but the dispenser defines where you want your team to be. I've talked about this a few times in the videos, but I really just want to nail it down on each individual building in this video, because I see people just slap down the dispenser next to their sentry, and that is totally fine if you're just playing selfish. But the dispenser is where your team is going to be if they want heals when the medic isn't around, or if there isn't any medic. If there isn't any medic, it's even more important. And where your demo and your heavy and your pyro are going to be getting all their ammunition. So if you're playing on a pub server, like a Dust Bowl server, and there's a lot of soldiers and demos, they're going to be relying on that dispenser so that they can just keep up the spam. So you want to place it just close enough to corners, not at the corner where it can get destroyed, but just around the corner, so that you want your team to be sitting on that dispenser, right, to get heals. They're going to be doing that anyway, so you want it in a nice area where you want your team to be holding. So if you're near a control point, have the dispenser near the control point, not on it so it gets destroyed when they push, but in a position where by innately having your team on the dispenser, they are contesting the control point. Think of it like an RTS game. This is why a lot of people tend to like Engineers. It's like its own strategy game. It very much is. And think that if you have a team of people who don't know how to play the game, if they're new to the game, they, with all due respect, are kind of like your minions who you can micro and macro using the psychology of your buildings. You have your dispenser where you want them to stand. It's like in Command & Conquer, where when you're training your units, you can put down a flag where they spawn after they're being created, they run to the area. That flag is your dispenser. You want them standing there. So you can kind of use that to pull their attention a little bit closer. And speaking of pulling people's attention, the teleporter is without a doubt the most important building in the game. At least in my opinion, as someone who uses Eureka Effect a lot, I think teleporter has an intense impact on the game, even without being on attack. Like, you can use it for teleporting with Eureka, or just teleporting your team. I say just, because I like engineering, it's pretty fun. So with teleporter, it's very important that you have one thing in mind when placing your teleporter. I don't want to limit people's imagination on pubs. I love seeing people in pubs just play engineer in a completely new way than I haven't seen before. It's so nice, it's so creative. I just want one thing to nail in your mind when you're placing your telly, and it is options. You want to give whoever takes your teleporter as many options as they can in directions to go. So, for example, I had this in a couple games, and it really puts me off a little bit on pushing bad water last when you're on like bad water third. You want to have your teleporter round about choke where the third point is, where the railroad is coming around the corner. You want that with your dispenser and your teleporter, because when they take that teleporter, they can choose, do they want to go to choke where the card is, do they want to go to map room, or do they want to go through tires to go to the flank. They have all those options available to them. But I see NGs put their tellies in tires by the windows, or in map room, like at the little like storage room before map room, and that is almost throwing a little bit. Like, I don't want to put these engineers down because they probably either don't know better or they just want to try something out, and that is totally fine. I just want to make it clear that when you put your team so they only have one option to push through, it makes it so easy for the enemy team to win, because you're putting all your team through a choke, and a demo man or a soldier can just spam that choke, and suddenly your team is just getting destroyed and they can't push. And not only that, but if you put your whole teleporter base on one of those flanks, the enemy team can just advance through the main area, come behind, kill all of you from both directions with a pincer maneuver, and then forward hold you. Oftentimes people don't do this in pubs because they're not coordinated, but I like to play pubs with a lot of friends in parties, and I believe the matchmaker prioritizes having like one party per team if it can, so there obviously isn't just a steamroll. Depends what time of day you're playing. If you're playing late at night, probably doesn't end up happening, but oftentimes I'll end up playing with a lot of people I recognize from Highlander, and if there is one party on the enemy team that has like someone who I know is a good shot caller and a leader, like a demo man or a medic, and then a bunch of their friends, I know I'm going to have a very interesting game. So if I have people on my team inhibiting that, kind of ruins the experience a little bit. So yeah, no offense to engineers, new engineers, like if you're just starting out, but please, when you're building your teleporter, options. So let me just go over these buildings again in a one word to describe my philosophy behind every building. So level 3 Sentry, I would say flag, or area control, but that's two words. I'd say flag, because Think of it like playing Jarvan in League of Legends. You throw down that flag. What other references can I say that people won't get? Think of it like the encampment district from Civilization 6 with walls so you can bombard. Yeah. In fact, I think the whole NG is just the encampment district. The mini sentry, I'd say, is its own different thing. I'd say the mini sentry, I'd say, I want to call it like an animal, like a snake or a raptor. Like, it does damage, it's very good, but you don't want it to just be in front. You want it to come in from the side. You want that clever girl turn around. You're a scout with like 2 HP running towards the med pack. Actually, no, you're a scout with full HP with 1 HP missing, and your medic is burning on fire 2 HP, and you're gunning for that health pack before he gets it. You turn around, shit, there's a mini sentry on that health pack, you're dead. Well, both of you are dead. Probably the medic gets out alive and calls you a loser. That's the mini sentry. Yeah, what would be that as a one word? I'm just gonna say annoying. That's a good word for mini sentry. Annoying. Dispenser, I would say, one word. I think I made this a little bit too difficult. I should have maybe wrote a script for this. Nah, scripts. Who needs scripts? I'd say that the dispenser is maybe a waypoint. It is the place where you want your team to be, it's where you want them to hold, it's where they're innately going to stand, so you want it to be a place, a very designated location that you can manipulate how your team is going to be positioned on the map, because they need that ammo and they need that heals, and my computer just went into standby mode. And teleporter, I would have to say, is options. Just give your team as many options as possible. Don't put the telly in a flank, just put it in the place where your team can decide, I want to push main, I want to push flank. Don't put it too far away, and for the love of God, don't be that person who just puts their entrance like 10 miles from spawn. Like, I don't, like, why? Anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, whatever, it's probably more of a podcast, and I'll see you next time.
Hold my hand, you're dragging me along this quicksand. Salt water and castles falling down. As the glass fills up with the rain, don't be ashamed. You only get one damn chance with this game.